So I got something in my inbox saying that September 10th is National or International Suicide Prevention Day. And it came with a whole packet of materials and things to discuss it. So I thought it would be very good to do one or maybe two BBCs on this topic. A few years ago, I was asked to speak at one of the suicide prevention, it was a suicide prevention conference, but it was also addressing people who are survivors of suicide, which means a survivor of suicide doesn't mean that you tried to kill yourself. It means somebody close to you did, and it affected you, and so you're surviving their suicide. So, of course, prevention is the best medicine, as they say. So I thought to talk a little bit about it, and I copied some of their pages. If anybody wants to read the whole thing, I'm happy to send it to you. It's really quite complete and very good. So they said first there's some key truths about suicide. First one, suicide is almost always preventable. Okay? So that is if somebody's intentions are identified and the person receives effective help and support. Of course, if you have no idea that the person is suicidal, and if they don't receive support, then of course, it's a whole different ball game. So this statement that it's almost always preventable is not to be used as a reason to feel guilty if somebody else suicided and you couldn't stop them. Yeah, because this often happens, when somebody suicides, then the people around them keep going, I shoulda, coulda, woulda, oughta, whatever, which is not at all helpful, because it was that person's choice. And if nobody knew, if they didn't express their intention, if they didn't receive help, then it's not a question of blaming one of the survivors. Okay, but it is saying here that, I think they said that, to really pinpoint that if we have our eyes open and can recognize symptoms, that then it's, preventable. The second one I found interesting is asking someone about suicide will not cause a suicide to occur. And see, this is one of the things that prevents us from identifying other people's intention, is because it's not so nice in society to say, are you thinking of killing yourself? You're afraid if you say that maybe they'll say, oh, well, maybe that's an alternative, maybe I should do that. But what it's saying here is, if you have suspicions, then say it. It's not something bad to talk about, and hopefully if the person is, then they will say so, and then, we can arrange for them to get help. The third one is that suicide is a public health problem that is increasing in intensity each year. Yeah, and so it really is a public health problem. Just to have some stats, in 2010, the suicide rate in the U.S. was 12.08 people per 100,000. In 2014, 4 years later, it was 12.93, nearly three more people. Yeah. And, it's increasing. When I think, why is it increasing? I think because through the media, through our culture, we build up like you should be happy all the time. You should get everything you want all the time. And so when somebody isn't happy all the time, when they can't make everything work in their lives so it comes out picture perfect, then they get despondent. And then the depression, the despondency makes them feel like their life is useful. So I think when we don't, emphasize this whole thing about you gotta be the best and you gotta be the first and gotta be better than everybody else, that might ease the pressure on people. Because just when you hear about, what teenagers have to do to get into college now is much more than what we had to do. They have much more pressure. Plus they have all the school debts afterwards. Yeah. And when we went, many of us, the school wasn't as expensive. So there's that kind of thing. Also, what's interesting here is there's some more stats coming. But I remember from when I studied up on this before I went to the previous conference, one of the biggest suicide groups is older men. Yeah, you wouldn't expect it. Yeah, because in many ways, those are the people who made it in life, aren't they? The older white men. But they're one of the highest suicide groups, I think, because when they retire, they don't know how to make their lives useful when they aren't, when they don't have a position, when they aren't making money, something like that. So, to really look out for older people, not just young people. Another point is that suicide rates continue to increase while homicide rates decrease, which is interesting, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, and another point, firearms are consistently the leading cause of death by suicide. Yeah? So this whole thing about gun prevention is, not gun prevention, about suicide prevention is related with, gun, proper use and purchase of guns. Yeah. It isn't that people are trying to take away your gun so you can't protect yourself. It's that there's much more likelihood of not only homicide, but here especially suicide, if there's a gun in the house. Yeah, and if it's not locked up properly. Yeah, we had something happen a couple of years ago. One of our friends came to visit, and her mother works in the hospital, I think it was in Sandpoint. And the anesthesiologist there, very clearly highly educated person, had just killed himself because of what was going on in a divorce, his divorce. And he killed himself with a gun, probably because the gun was just around. It was easy to get. You can get it quickly. You don't have to think. Yeah? With other forms of suicide, people have to think. Like if you're going to use pills, you have to spend more time and try and figure out how you're going to get the pills. With a gun, it's very quick. And so people do it very impetuously, whereas if they have to take time to find the means, they often calm down and then don't suicide. Okay, so more than half of all suicides in the U.S. could be prevented if firearms were secured and stored properly. More than half the suicides. Yeah? This means guns in gun cabinets or gun safes using trigger locks and other safety measures. Yeah. Not difficult to do. Yeah? But people don't take care. And then in the heat of the moment, they do something that they can never undo. Okay, and then this particular packet emphasizes suicide with the young people, even though they're not the leading group. But it says that suicide is the second leading cause of death for individuals younger than 35. Yeah, probably the first one I would assume would be accidents. Yeah, I don't know if it's what kind of, if all the accidents are grouped together or what, but the second leading cause of death for people under 35. Okay. Some other things. 60% of people who die by suicide have major depressive disorder. So this is should be a big red flag, you know? If we're living with or working with somebody with major depressive order, they're at high risk. And what often happens is in the winter, people get, especially with seasonal affect disorder, if people are already depressed, they get more depressed in the winter. When people are very, very depressed, that's usually not when they kill themselves. It's when springtime comes and they start to feel a little bit better. Then they have the energy to do it. When they're super down in winter, they don't do it. Yeah? Uh-huh.
Also, the other time to be very carefully watch people is when they first start on their antidepressants and when they first start to then they have the energy.
Right. Okay, so our psychologist says another time to watch people is when they've been having major depression and they first start to take their meds. So they start to feel a little bit better, then they have more energy, and that's also a high risk time. Okay. For every suicide, there are 25 suicide attempts. This is telling us that there's a lot of people who don't really want to kill themselves, but they're trying to call for help and they don't know another way to do it. Yeah? So the thing is, if somebody is attempting suicide, instead of getting mad at them for being so foolish, you know, get them to a doctor or to a therapist and get them the help that they need. Okay. For every woman who dies by suicide, 4 men die. Okay. Actually, I think that many more women try to kill themselves, but I think many more of them are calling for help. The men are fewer in number who try to kill themselves, but there's so far down that they do it. Yeah. It could also be that if guns are a major cause, that men feel more comfortable using guns. Women would probably use pills, and pills aren't nearly as successful as guns are. So that could be something too. Every 40 seconds, someone in the world dies by suicide. Okay. And then 45% of those who die by suicide see their primary care doctor within a month of their deaths. So what this is saying is that primary care doctors can really step up to the plate much more and talk to their patients more, ask more questions. If they're in to see their doctor within a month before they actually suicide, the thought may be going on inside, and if the doctor can ask, then the doctor may be able to save their life. So we have to get over this thing of our fear of asking or bringing it up, you know, because that really prevents from noticing what's going on with people. There are many, many hotlines and many things to do. I'll talk more about it tomorrow, about how to prevent suicide. But there's many hotlines. There's many organizations that you can access online. The one where I gave the talk many years ago, I was so impressed with them. The people were really compassionate and really kind, and they organized the conference so that people could really talk and share, because for the survivors of a loved one's suicide, they need to talk and share in a climate where there's no stigma. Yeah, because there's such stigma in the country, in the world, about suicide, that very often after somebody loses a loved one, they don't want to tell anybody else. Yeah, because it looks bad on the family, they feel guilty, society thinks it's creepy, I don't know what, but we kind of have to get over that to really benefit the people who are suffering from that loss and from the people who are thinking of doing it. Okay, do you want to add anything?
Worked with a lot of people who attempted suicide, and at the last moment it was like, oh, I don't want to do this, so that was very common.
Okay, so very common that people were up to the verge of attempting suicide, and then they backed out at the last moment.
In many different ways. One woman was driving her car into the bridge columns,
Mm.
and
Mm-hmm.
just as she was getting ready to hit, she slammed the brakes on. She didn't die. Terrible
Yeah.
head injury, but that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Realizing that they aren't taking care of people that have shot themselves in the head.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah. So in your experience, a lot of the suicide attempts are not so much the person wants to kill themselves as they want help, and they don't know how else to say it. Yeah.
Or they've talked about it, and then people are too uncomfortable to
Yeah.
open with them.
Right. Yeah. Or they have brought it up, and then the family says, shh, don't talk about that. Or the doctor says, oh, it's only a fleeting thought, ignore it. Yeah. Yeah, so to really take people seriously if they bring it up.
Even if they don't bring it up, if you think somebody is depressed, and
Yeah.
ask them if they have thoughts of suicide.
Yeah, so I think that's what they're getting at here. If you think, ask them, even if they haven't said anything.
The person would feel cared for if somebody to ask that.
Yeah,
Really,
yeah. Yeah, they would feel cared for. We would think, oh, they might feel embarrassed, they might feel caught, but they might actually feel cared for, And that's one of the major suicide prevention things, which I'll talk about tomorrow, is connection with people. Yeah.
The difference between men and women could be also because on men from childhood on different expectations from society, a different pressure they have to go through.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, men and women have different conditioning factors that could lead. Okay. Yeah, let's just 2 more comments and then we'll stop.
I've been thinking about how it requires a certain amount of tunnel vision to do that act, to kill yourself. I've never suffered from chronic depression, but I've had some depression a couple times from certain events in my life. And I had to tell myself, this too will pass,
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
They're just stuck in that moment and not be able to see options.
Yeah.
We need to be able to.
Right. It is very much a tunnel vision, and thinking that how you feel now is always how you're going to feel. Yeah.
I'm just personally uncomfortable with the very first point in how it's currently being, expressed, that suicide can be mostly prevented, because I know of a number of cases where the families and friends were doing everything in their capacity to help the person, and still commit suicide.
Right. But it said most cases. It didn't say all cases.
Yeah.
Because
Someone encountering that would have great difficulty.
Mhm.
That was their experience.
Okay, so you're saying that in cases that the family did know, that family did intervene, they did receive medical care, they still killed themselves. And so for those people to hear that most suicide can be prevented, it would be rather difficult for them to hear. That's because people go from most to all. And it didn't say all, it said most. And people have to, it's the same tunnel vision he's talking about. The same thing of I shoulda, coulda, woulda, oughta, was supposed to, and I wasn't able to, and it's my fault. Yeah. So I acknowledge that that people who had that experience could read this and take it the wrong way, but I'm saying they're taking it the wrong way is a result of their tunnel vision. That's what I'm saying. Of course they're in pain. Okay, we're not negating that, and we're not telling them they should have been able to do it. We're just saying, please, try and read the words and recognize that it's not about you. Yeah, this was one of the chief points in the conference I attended, is because people tend to blame themselves. Even if they got the help and did everything and tried to prevent it, they still blame themselves. And one person at the conference was saying that suicide is like the ultimate selfish thing to do, because you're not caring at all about the people who care for you and care about you and love you. And I was rather shocked when I heard that, and I thought about it, and it's true. And I think sometimes suicide survivors, recognizing that, can see that, in those cases, they had nothing to do with it. It was clearly that person's choice. And a very self-centered choice, and a very hopeless choice. And that doesn't mean we're criticizing people. Okay? So you may or may not agree with me.